Today, Reverend Hart concludes his two-part series focusing on Star Wars theology. The Star Wars series, including this season's latest segment, The Force Awakens, has introduced the world to differing understandings of God and faith that are actually quite profound. Last Sunday, Reverend Hart introduced the congregation to the importance of Star Wars theology in contemporary culture, and today dives deep into aspects of that theology. Enjoy. Paul Reed is a technical wizard. He had to do a heck of a lot of research to be able to pull that one off. Give him a big hand. That's so cool. Yeah, just flick those off. So we certainly do want to have some fun here this morning. And so how many of you have seen The Force Awakens or any of the Star Wars movies? I did an introduction to them, to the movies last week that some of you may have caught, and said that I wanted to dive into Star Wars theology a little bit because The Force Awakens is just so much fun. And I said it's having such an influence on contemporary culture and the way that people think about God and faith and religion. And so that's kind of why I'm doing it. So, and is Hope, did she leave or is she's gone? And it's so cool that the first Star Wars movie was redubbed afterwards A New Hope. Did you make that connection? So it's really, really cool that Hope was our practicing Jedi Master this morning. Han Solo in A New Hope said this: "Kid, I've flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything. There's no mysterious energy field controlling my destiny." He learned otherwise, didn't he? Let me share a quote with you. "It's in every rock and every tree. It's in the air around you, the book before you, the planet beneath you. Your body is not a separate object, but part of an interconnected universal whole. Everything is a part of you, and you are a part of everything. It's always there, like a sound, so omnipresent that you lose your awareness of it. Yet at times, when you are at peace, you can sense the surge of its energy through you. You follow the flow, opening yourself to feelings and information far beyond what your body can tell you. You even at times control it, directing its energy towards your ends. It can levitate objects. It can transmit thoughts. It can influence the weak-minded. It can reveal visions of the past and the future. It bestows on those in tune with it a sixth sense and even life after death. It has a dark side and a light side, and it is the Force, the heart and soul of George Lucas's Star Wars universe. It is also the most fantastical and least scientific element in that universe, or at least no scientific explanation for the Force is ever given. This was written earlier, right? And metachlorians are now being lifted up as a possible scientific reason for the Force. The Force seems to arise from a mixture of myth, magic, and religion. So shouldn't science just keep its nose out? Shouldn't religion just keep its nose out? Yet the purpose of science is to understand what has not yet been understood. And throughout its history, science has been faced with inexplicable phenomena and invisible forces. As our understanding of them grows greater, the questions we face likewise grow greater. And in its quest to understand the great mysteries, as cosmologist Stephen Hawking says, why it is that we in the universe exist, science and mysticism and religion often connect and sometimes overlap. And it's in these areas that we might receive some insight into the Force and that ultimate question, could the Force really exist? That's a quote from a wonderful book called The Science of Star Wars by a gal by the name of Jeannie Kavlos. She's an astrophysicist and mathematician who taught physics and math at the Michigan State University. And then she was also a trainer at the NASA Astronaut Training Center, the Johnson Training Center as well, and she's gone on to be a writer about all things wonderful and mysterious. George Lucas said that he put the Force into Star Wars originally. He included the Force in Star Wars because he wanted to make young people think about God. He says, this is in a 2000 documentary, he said, if I ask a young person, do you believe in God? And they say, I don't know. He said, I don't think that's an acceptable response. He said, I believe in God, and I think if you've got any kind of opinion about God, you should be thinking about God, and you should have some kind of response to that question, he said. Because he said, anyone who has any kind of interest in the larger picture of the mysteries of the universe has got to address the God question at some point or in some sort of way. That's George Lucas himself. The whole series, the whole Star Wars universe, from its beginning, has been this kind of gradual and progressive exploration of God by addressing the question of the Force, okay? And it's drawn upon contemporary scientific sorts of discoveries, as well as upon ancient religious and mystical understandings. Now, the reason I had Debbie share with you, where's Debbie? You're up there somewhere. The reason I had Debbie share those two readings with you from the Bible this morning is because Elijah and Elisha in the Old Testament, they were Old Testament prophets. And the one we read about this morning was Elisha. As well as Jesus, from the perspective of a Jedi master, they would be seen as Jedi masters as well. They were able to, according to the stories, utilize a divine force. And the Bible associates it as a divine force. They were able to use this divine force to effect miraculous things. So Elisha in the Old Testament, we hear this morning, it's, in a sense, he's precognition. He's able to predict the future, that the Shunammite woman will indeed give birth to a son. He's able to engage in telekinesis, which actually affects the physiology of her being and her old husband so that they do have kids. Okay? And he's able even to use the Force to bring back to life, to breathe life back into her son when he's apparently dead. And it's really interesting the way Elisha does that, right? He tells his servant to take his staff and to lay it on the boy. You could just see this, right? It's really cool, right? And then the body of the boy is lying on the bed, and Elisha, he prostrates himself down. Yeah, I won't do that this morning, but anyways, he prostrates himself down on the body of the boy. Remember, we're talking about our hands, the energy fields between our hands. Well, just think, when our whole bodies, John, come on up. You're on the hot seat this morning. You're right up front. When our whole bodies come together, the force, the energy fields that surround our body link up with one another. And if Elisha has this very, very strong energy field, perhaps if the boy isn't fully dead, he's actually, this whole body energy field is breathing into and circulating around the boy, right? And the boy comes, his life comes back to him. Love you, buddy. Jesus also, right, in the New Testament story with the woman who has the hemorrhage, right, the blood flow. So the interesting thing is that the woman comes up to Jesus and she has faith, and the Gospels tell us Jesus didn't even have to do anything. It says that there was this power, this energy flowed out of Jesus miraculously into the woman and healed her, right? So it's like Jesus is possessed of a very, very strengthened kind of force field or energy field, which is how the Jedi Master would describe it, that is just all around him. And that when people were open to his love and that healing energy flowing into them, all they had to do is come up and touch him. And it's like a conduit, an electrical conduit, and the force would flow into them and create healing. And then, of course, there's the story about the healing and the bringing back to life of the centurion's son as well, right? Of the synagogue official's son as well. So there's this kind of miraculous abilities associated with spirit people in the Bible, who Star Wars would refer to as Jedi Masters, with very highly developed and very powerful access to a universal force that's everywhere, and that's also part of us. Contemporary science. Think about this for a second. Contemporary science, so the ancient biblical tradition, and even the ancient Romans as well, believed that there were forces in the universe, okay, that we could access and that spiritual people could access them and do wonderful things with. So, for the longest of time, people really didn't know if that was true or that was false or what that was really all about. But science comes along and starts to explore those kinds of notions and understandings. And what does science actually come up with over the last couple of hundred years and in our contemporary day and age? Well, science discovers that there are 4 totally invisible but absolutely real forces that permeate the universe, okay? So what are the 4 forces? Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and the weak nuclear forces. You can't see them, and for the life of us, we would have no idea if they really existed until science managed to figure out ways with various forms of instruments to tap into these forces and these powers that permeate the whole universe. And as a result of that, we can now project up on the screen images and light. I can pick up my iPad and I can sort of see, I can hook into a World Wide Web that gives me all sorts of information. I can get onto my little phone and I can talk to someone on the other side of the world. We can get into an airplane and we can fly through the sky at 600 kilometers per hour. For the ancients, the things that we can do today with our technology, but with these invisible forces that nobody can see and nobody really knows if they're real or not. For the ancients, what would those things have been? What these capacities that we have? They'd be miracles. They'd be absolute miracles, right? To be able to do the things we do today, they'd say, it's amazing. And any modern who's able to do those things would be seen as, whoa, some kind of major spiritual master or Jedi master or something or other, right? So what Star Wars is doing is Star Wars is actually simply projecting on the basis of these invisible forces. It's looking to some of the ancient kinds of things that have happened and we see in religious circles and whatnot, and they're starting to say, and of course science is also looking for that single unifying force that combines all the other forces together. And it's suggesting, I wonder if there is another force in the universe that might enable us to do all sorts of other wonderful things that we can't do yet, maybe without the use of technology, maybe just by tapping into that energy in some form or fashion. The force is an energy field. It's created by all living things. It's what gives a Jedi Knight his power. It binds the whole universe together. It kind of does sound sort of like God. It sounds like a definition of spirit. And science is very much, in the world today, looking and speculating that such a force and reality actually exists. One which is characterized by non-locality, where everything across space and time is instantly connected. Okay? one in which death may not even represent an actual ending, but is simply a transitional force in a larger kind of energy and reality. But there is one distinction that I need to share with you, and this is the toughest part of this whole kind of conversation. There's one distinction, and we just don't have time to talk a whole lot more about it, but the one distinction I need to talk about with you with regards to the Force is that Star Wars suggests that there is a dark side and a light side to the Force. And there's a distinction in Christianity here. Christianity would suggest that no, the Force is only ultimately characterized by light. And there are people who perhaps can learn to work with the Force and be open to the Force, but then can slip away from the Force. But when they slip away from the light and the power, they actually lose their power and energy, so that you don't have this kind of equal strength between light and dark that you see characterized in Star Wars. The Force is characterized by light. Christianity characterizes evil as the absence of light. So for the Force to have a dark side is actually, in Christian terms, a contradiction in terms. Okay? The Force is characterized by non-locality. It's characterized also by timelessness. That means that everything, everywhere is connected all at once, okay? And that's what we're discovering in quantum mechanics today, that you can actually move, that the speed of light isn't the fastest thing in the universe. It's the fastest, perhaps, physical thing, but at a spiritual level, everything is totally connected. So it's possible for everything to instantly affect everything else if you're focusing and working at a spiritual level. And the Force is also characterized by a kind of a timelessness, an ability to look backwards and forwards in time, which we say is also described by God. What Christianity suggests is that if everything is connected, is part of a single force or reality, what that means is that if I know myself, and what do we always say when we say namaste? If I know myself to be one with you, to ultimately be connected with you, what does that give rise to? It gives rise to love. When I recognize that as a result of the Force, Roddy are actually manifestations of one underlying reality, okay? When I see that Roddy and I are one, then that generates love and compassion within me for Roddy, because I recognize that when I relate to Roddy, I'm relating actually to a part of myself. And that's what we believe about divinity and about spirit, that everything is a manifestation of this one underlying ultimate reality. And when we truly see that, understand that, it cannot lead to evil. It cannot lead to hurting each other and killing each other. It leads precisely to the opposite. It leads to compassion and love. It is possible, and the Bible actually suggests this as well, for people to enter into a deep awareness of their oneness and unity with the Force, with Spirit, but then as a result of a variety of factors to slip out of that awareness and then to perhaps engage in evil once again. But if you are truly centered in the Force, if you are truly centered in the light, then that naturally just gives birth to more and more light, not more darkness. The training for a Jedi Master, if you'll remember, involves purification of emotional states. It involves a profound centering and a learning to become profoundly peaceful. What happens in Star Wars is they suggest that the Force, and there are many different kinds of Force actually in Star Wars, and they're all manifestations, and that's what makes this incredibly complicated. But if you're hooked into the ultimate Force of Star Wars, the unifying Force, you are actually in a space of profound equanimity, profound peacefulness and serenity, because it's only in such a state that you can actually become sensitized to the Force. So that's the big distinction between Star Wars and what would be a Christian take on Star Wars. Star Wars is a fascinating and it's a delightful play on what if the Force was evil and good at one and the same time. But the distinction, and there are forms of religion in the world, Manichaeism is one of them, that believe that there is an ultimate dark side and an ultimate good side. Whereas Christianity believes, on the other hand, that there is one ultimate reality, and that darkness within that ultimate reality is a result of people not being tuned into the light, not being tuned into the ultimate single reality, and therefore they can act out of darkness and evil and be cruel to each other. But if you truly become a Jedi Master, and you truly learn to become sensitized to that deeper underlying reality and force that we call spirit, which is another word for force, that you can only actually manifest light and goodness and love. And that's why throughout the tradition of the world, the great spiritual mystics, the people who have been tuned into that larger, deeper, unifying spirit, it can also be called force and energy, have always been profoundly loving, caring, healing, wonderful people. My little theological lesson for George Lucas today. To cultivate the force, to cultivate the spirit, is to cultivate aspects of reality that science is beginning to discover, what religion has always said, are probably very, very real. And we can learn to tune into them and sensitize to them. And the hope is that the more people learn to do this, namaste, the more we learn to do that, actually, the more our world will be transformed into the kind of place that the ultimate divine intends it to be. May the Force be with you. Amen.
Called you each by name. Come and follow. your name, embracing all your pain. Stand up now, walk and live. Do not be afraid, I am with you. I have called you each by name. Come and follow me, I will bring you home. I love you and you are mine. Do not be afraid, I am with you. I have called you